relationships don't necessarily break up because there isn't love there. It's maybe an inability to know how to navigate something so big and so serious.
Why are we talking about this?
Because we endured that last year. And I imagine it's a pretty hot topic.
Trauma?
How couples navigate trauma. I think trauma, like past tense trauma, but also maybe like current tense trauma. If maybe they're in a traumatic
As in
event.
shared trauma.
Shared trauma, or one person goes through an intense trauma while in relationship, not necessarily due to the relationship. So it's like, how do you show up for each other?
Right, because I guess the trauma changes an individual.
Yeah.
You can't ever not. You can't go back to where you were.
No. And I would hope that you wouldn't want to. I would hope that the trauma, this could be an unpopular opinion, but I would hope that the trauma would actually help you expand beyond who you were when the initial trauma occurred. So it would actually fortify you into an even better person. Not that that's an excuse for trauma in any capacity, and I'm not recommending trauma, obviously.
Go out and traumatize yourself, kids, just so you can have a healthy relationship. I think that's the takeaway.
No.
No?
No.
That doesn't sound right. No.
Like, I think back of my childhood trauma. I also think back of the trauma that we went through last year with our pregnancy, and realizing that...
Thank you.
There you go.
I need to be able to eat my avocado.
It's lunchtime, everybody. Realizing that part of what that trauma was for me was just how unstable I actually felt within myself. So would I want to just go back to being somewhat unstable and like
You feel more
shaky
stable
in
now?
my confidence? Yeah.
How so?
It empowered me in a way that I wouldn't have known or had access to had pregnancy not occurred. Like, pregnancy revealed to me where I actually wasn't fully trusting myself, which was a massive, like, eye-opener for me, because I had really fortified myself and I had built myself up to feel really confident, to feel like I could withstand any circumstance. And then pregnancy came, and all of a sudden it was like I was in the absolute inverse, where I was terrified. And so it was it kind of asked this bigger question, like, what is my inner sense of security and safety actually built on?
And what did you find?
I think there's a lot of self-reliance there. And
Self-reliance? What does that mean?
relying on myself for everything. If it was making money, I had to get it done. If it was taking care of the relationship, I had to do it. Like, everything was like very egoically me. Not ego in like this inflated sense, but ego in this...
Responsible sense?
No, not responsible, but what I discovered in our pregnancy was that ultimately I still was struggling to trust in the greater aspect of life. Like, struggling to trust that I was supported, struggling to trust that Spirit, the universe, God had my back, that I would be safe, that I would find a way, rather than convincing myself that those things were true. So that it wasn't really grounded in anything. It was grounded in me, and I think when it comes down to us and circumstance or trauma enters the picture, all of a sudden that rug gets pulled out from underneath.
The rug being the self-assurance?
Yeah.
Oh,
Safety, confidence.
Okay, so there was this level of self-assurance, confidence, strength in yourself prior to the pregnancy, and then the occurrence of the pregnancy shook all of that and asked you to rebuild it, like understand it deeper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because pregnancy, in my fear state, it was revealing all those holes in that previous story that I had. Of like, I'm so self-assured, I'm so confident, I can tackle anything. Right? Pregnancy showed up, and I was like, wait a second, I don't actually know if that's true. And that fear was part of the reason that I ended up terminating anyways. So it was like such a lack of disbelief in myself, actually, is what that revealed to me personally.
So where are you at with it now?
I'm rebuilding more of a faith-based sense of security, where if pregnancy highlighted where I wasn't fully trusting in the bigger picture, now I've been really working to fortify that for myself. So I'm deepening into trust, because otherwise I just kind of felt like I was always on this hamster wheel of productivity or of work, because there was a trauma response there around scarcity, which ultimately underneath that was like, I don't trust that at the end of the day I'm supported. And that's bigger than you, that's bigger than me. There was this overall sense of like, I don't know if God's got my back.
I resonate with that. I feel I'm going through that right now.
Tell me more.
Currently, I think similarly, previously, I just had a sense of self and assurance and that belief in myself and the direction I was going and the things I was doing. It's garbage. It's God saying something. You're trash.
Bells on that. Bells on that. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. We have an answer.
Winner. And right now things feel so uncertain, and it does feel like God doesn't have my back, because every step that I take doesn't feel assured and it doesn't feel supported, and that feels destabilizing. And I cognitively know that I'm not alone and I am safe and everything is fine because I'm still here. I'm still breathing.
Yeah, you're eating a delicious avocado with raisins.
I'm eating
it's
a
pretty
delicious
supported.
avocado with raisins.
God bless it.
It's my new favorite snack.
You put honey on it, no?
So
Or like a sweetener.
A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and then was it that guacamole spice with some honey on top, and then some raisins. It's good for me. I like it.
So feeling like God isn't supporting, even though cognitively you know that is, you are.
So what do you do? What did you do when you feel like God didn't have your back? Just start trusting that He does?
Well, I think it was a little different. That wasn't the conversation that I was having with myself. The conversation that I was having was, if that was actually true, like let's say that God didn't have my back. Did I trust myself enough to be able to go on that journey? And that revealed to me, no. No, I don't. So there actually, I don't think, was ever a moment where I truly believed that God didn't have my back. It was the disbelief I had in myself inside the fear of that, if that makes sense. So my fears of motherhood were like, oh my God, I'm going to be a single mom. My childhood stuff was, yeah, it could be. So many people I know have had babies and then ended up being single parents, and I hear how hard it is for them. And I was like, that's not a future that I want for myself. I hear stories of how it...
difficult to receive.
Why?
Because it ultimately feels like that's a reflection of me. Like,
doesn't have to be.
What was it then?
A reflection of me.
Okay. Oh, just like the fear that could happen to you.
Yeah. Okay. And then I also had this ancestral trauma where, I was, in some way, shape, or form, my mother would say, taken away from her and brought up in this family that was not my family. So there was also a little bit of that running, like, oh my God, what if, my mind is playing worst case scenarios. What if my baby gets taken from me because I actually can't do this, right? But everything was about my inability to figure it out, my inability to take care of myself, to take care of the baby, all of these things. So at the end of the day, none of it was actually about God and whether or not I was supported, it was deeply foundational in the sense of like,
Fear.
do I have what it takes to go on this journey regardless of what it's about to look like? And when I really truly examined myself, the evidence of that situation would show that that answer was no.
And is that what drove your decision?
A lot of it, yeah. What drove my decision was all fear state. Well, not all. I would say a majority of it was fear state. The other part of it was more practicality.
Right. Okay.
But fear is what ultimately had me commit to that decision, and which is ultimately why I regretted it for a long time afterwards. And I went through that whole like postpartum depression and all of that because I was like, wow, this is how little you trust yourself. That feels so shitty.
And how did you step out of that or beyond that or integrate that?
I started deepening my faith in something bigger than just me. So I didn't have to carry it all on my own. And that's where I feel like my connection with God has been so supportive over this last year, is that I'm of the belief that God is there and God is watching and God is supporting and that God is always available when I want him and I need him. That doesn't necessarily mean he shows up in the way that I want him, but he will show up in the way that I need him. And in that, it's been nice because something that I realized with the pregnancy was that I don't want to go through my life on my own, fully relying on myself. I really don't want that. I don't want to have to be solely responsible for every penny of my income or every moment of my life, because I'm not in control of any of that. That's such a lie, to think that I actually have any control over how money enters my bank account, who it comes from, where it comes from. Like, so, there's so much magic to that for me can only be explained as a spiritual experience. I don't know these people that come into my field and work with me, but they find me. So what explains that? For me, it's like, oh, if I was self-reliant, I wouldn't have access to necessarily any of that. So for me, there's always this spiritual undercurrent that is happening behind the scenes. I want to trust that more so my nervous system can chill the fuck out and not constantly be in stress, or in the past it was like fight or flight response or disassociative response because life was just too much and I couldn't handle being here.
It sounds like there's a balancing act there of trusting in something greater than you, but also showing up and not handing everything over.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be proactive. It's right relationship. That's what right relationship is about. So in order for me to be in right relationship with spirit, I need to be answering the call, like doing the work, right? Like I need to be a proactive participant. I'm not just laying with my legs in the air like, oh, everything happened to me and through me and I don't have to do anything for it. It's not about that. It's about being in right relationship with life.
Right.
That was a little deep, y'all. But that's really how I feel right now. And I feel like that's what that journey of the trauma of our pregnancy that created a trauma in our relationship.
Was it the trauma of the pregnancy or the termination?
All of it. For me, it was all of it. The experience in and of itself was traumatizing for me on an emotional level, a psychological level, more than a physical level.
The pregnancy was traumatizing?
Yeah, just the whole experience.
Does that still echo into the relationship? And
Will you say that differently?
It was traumatizing, and that obviously wasn't there previously. So I guess you've worked in trauma a lot longer than I have and understand it a lot better than I do. Do people overcome trauma, or is it because there's always a taste of it or an echo of it that has an impact. And so, surviving trauma in a relationship is not getting over it, but learning to live with it.
Yeah. I feel like with trauma, it's about intimacy. And so that's our ability to be with circumstance, trauma, our nervous systems, our bodies, another person, the ability to be with that and essentially like extract whatever wisdom that experience has, so that when we move forward, we're doing so as a better, more whole individual. And so for me, when I think about my childhood trauma, I'm sure that there are ways that still reveals itself in the deeper pockets of how I relate. Not trusting spirit was an example of that, because when I was a child, I remember thinking to myself, like, well, if everybody's telling me that I'm a child of God, this would have never happened to me because I would have been protected, and yet it still happened. And so at an early age, this is when I first started questioning kind of God and this overall spiritual security, sense of spiritual security. And so I'm sure that there are elements of that linger, but it's the difference between letting that be the thing that controls my life and how I think and how I speak and how I show up or don't, versus me being in relationship with it and being able to say, wow, I see you, and I see why you're coming in at this particular moment and what you're trying to protect me from. And I love you, and I might not need that same nervous system activation in the same way anymore. So I get to continuously rewire that and repattern that. But for the most part, like, do we see much of my childhood trauma in our relationship? I personally don't think so.
What do you mean by that?
Like, as a baseline, I'm not disassociated every day. Our relationship pre-pregnancy was like lots of sexual connection, right? I wasn't afraid of sexual connection. Attachment styles weren't really getting triggered.
A lot of that changed for that year. Like, we went through, you went through a trauma that I was a part of, but experienced very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, I guess, predominantly yours, but also shared.
You're kind of like trauma adjacent.
I think it's a really interesting avenue to explore, and I don't know many guys who I know talk about this openly and their experience of it, but it's not like, yes, it happened in your body and it happened with you, but I was very much there and part of it and present for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like we've individually had our own trauma around it, but also our relationship suffered for at least that year.
Mm-hmm. But that wasn't due to my childhood trauma. That was due to that particular trauma. So there's probably subsets of childhood trauma maybe in there on a more spiritual, psychological sense.
We all carry the scars of our past.
Mm-hmm.
That impact.
Yeah. So I feel like that statement right there answers your question. It's like we do still carry the scar, but does it have the same intensity of emotional signature? No.
No, but it does impact how we navigate the world compared to those who haven't had that same trauma.
Mm-hmm. Something that I talk about often is where I feel that in the journey of my studies of trauma recovery, also of depth psychology and somatics is that when we actually really think back to our childhood and being a baby, there is so many traits and characteristics that we adopt unconsciously because that is ultimately what we think or perceive is going to keep us safe. And so what I like to pose, and this is a pretty deep question and a pretty deep journey to go on, is this question of what qualities of your personality are actually yours versus what were the ones that were adopted so you could continue receiving love, a sense of care, food, water, etc.
When you say yours, what do you mean by that?
Like actually true to essence. So a classic example that I give is that if you're a young child and you're easily excitable, and in that excitement you're boisterous and you're loud, you're excited, and you have a parent that scolds you for that behavior or punishes you for that behavior, all of a sudden you start to recognize, wow, okay, my excitement is no longer safe with this particular figure. So you adapt your personality around that figure. So somebody who's kind of quiet and a little meek might not actually be that way in essence, but they adopted that behavior because if they were true to their essence, there would have been consequence. The love, the safety, the belonging might have been removed in some capacity. So our personality traits are highly adaptive, in my personal opinion. So it's interesting when we start to strip away these like layers of identity, right? That's like, oh, well, I got that from my dad, and I got that from my grandparents, and I got this because of the community that I was raised in, and this because of the church that I went to, right? All of a sudden, there's like, without all those adaptive traits, there's this question of like, well, who am I underneath all of that? Like, what actually feels true for me as a person? These are all little traumas. Like, that's why I really truly feel, I'm like, we're all traumatized on some level because at an early age, we had to adapt in order to ensure that we would receive as much love, attention, affection as possible.
Well, we adapt and adopt behavioral patterns to keep us safe, to get the things that we desire, to avoid the things that we don't. And I think it's between like 4 and 7?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we start receiving, you think about when you first start understanding yeses and nos, that's around 2.
2, okay. So
it's just by the time you're 3, 4, 5, you actually have a voice to be in dialogue. But when you're 2 and you're starting to walk around and you're trying to grab for things and your parents are telling you yes, no, or you're crying creates this like avoidance or distance because the parent's tired or overburdened or example, that starts to shift.
None of it's consciously chosen.
That's what I mean.
Right.
So these are all adaptive behavioral traits that can start as early as infancy and can extend into then once we actually start forming our identity and we do have a voice, continues to shift.
It's like that thing that you like and that you do, is it actually because you like it or because all of the things that have happened in your life have just determined that it's something that you like?
And what you're saying, this is interesting because I have several clients right now and we're talking about the nervous system and how in particular the nervous system, when it is triggered or gets activated, it acts automatically. And so a lot of choice and agency becomes unavailable in that moment because the nervous system is just doing what it feels based upon what it knows is safe. What we find is that might not have actually been the safest choice, but it's acting automatically because you don't have conscious choice in that moment.
Well, at some point it was the safest choice.
Exactly.
And became the unconscious response to maintain safety or homeostasis. And then at some point it no longer becomes.
It's no longer true. That particular response is no longer necessary. But at that point, that has become such a deeply ingrained pattern that has become an identity, knowingly or unknowingly.
Well, then there's the question of, the person that you're in a relationship with, is that actually them?
Yes.
Or is it?
Also why I think relationships struggle, because you go through this honeymoon phase where you're so excited. You're like, oh my God, I love you so much. I can't stop touching you. This is amazing. And then the more time you spend together, that initial hormones, the mask starts to come off, and the real reactions, the more real person starts to show up. And then underneath that, you also have to think like, oh, well, I have an attachment style due to how I grew up. That became a pattern based upon what I received or I didn't receive. So even that in and of itself might not be your core essence. I really believe that naturally we come out, or we are formed as secure individuals. But life then shapes and molds us, quite literally, into these other creatures who are constantly looking for safety, belonging, love, support. And so if we're not getting that, we subtly start to manipulate ourselves so that we can receive that.
I think this is why I've been drawn to Tantra, and where the practices come in, where it's about being very present with the essence of your experience as opposed to your interpretation of it.
Yeah.
So it's hearing a sound rather than your interpretation of that sound. It's feeling a sensation rather than your interpretation of how that sensation is for you. That makes sense?
Yeah, a classic example of this is like if you think about being camping out in the woods and it's dark and you hear a sound, right? And your nervous system kind of goes, what's out there? Is it a bear? Is it this? Is it that, right? Until you can open up the tent and have a flashlight and receive some sort of confirmation that it's something or it's nothing, the mind is going to make up rationally or irrationally all the things that could be. Right? Our nervous system is no different. Our nervous system is going, hey, whoa, there's caution here. Here's all these signals that you're going to start to feel in different areas of your body. Until I can receive confirmation that we're actually okay, this is going to continue to be the baseline.
So it's separation of sensation and interpretation, like mind.
Yeah.
Body and mind.
Well, the mind wants to make meaning of what it's experiencing. And so it will do that in any way possible. And that's, I think, how we figure out like our internal dialogues, going back to like pregnancy and my psychological trauma, self-inflicted, that I endured from that, was that I was receiving all of these signals of warning in my body because I was terrified. And my mind then started to spin out on those signals, which made it really, really challenging to find myself in the middle of all of that, because everything is just blaring red alarms. And my mind and my body are amplifying those signals. And that's how it works with our nervous system, is you get a signal in your body, and then your mind tries to make meaning of it. And depending on the state of your mind, it will either help you feel supported or it will amplify that signal. And then they just feed off each other because it's a loop.
So then how do couples rebuild intimacy after crisis? How do they survive trauma? Because there might be people going through a personal trauma whilst in a relationship, or a shared trauma. How do they navigate that? How do they not let what happened implode what's there?
Yeah, it's a really tough journey. So if you're out there and you're going through this, I really feel you. And my first, gut instinct is like getting support. Like getting support in that through friends, through therapists, like somebody who can hold you as the individual in that season of your life. Because I think that there are some things, for example, our pregnancy was really hard for us to hold each other while simultaneously having really, really hard and challenging experiences. We did it, but I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm telling you, by the grit of our fucking teeth. Like, we were at the end of our rope several times because we just weren't able to get the type of support that we needed. And in those moments, I feel really grateful that I do somatic therapy, because it's like, okay, what are your practices? Like coming back to what you know and just having a bit more patience. And I think that that's another piece there, is that you really have to be willing to go on this journey despite the uncomfortability, and also despite what it brings up in you about how you feel about yourself, what you feel your partner might be reflecting in you. And so you have to realize there's two individual people that are going on a journey that on the surface really looks the same, but is very different internally.
I think that's such a key point. Ties to nervous system thresholds.
Yeah, oh my gosh, absolutely. Poof.
Because you go through something and someone has a low tolerance, then they're just, can't deal with this.
Yeah, they literally will shut down. Yeah.
Because it's easier for me to not be in this, so I'm going to just remove myself from this dynamic. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to do that. Mm-hmm. And so having a nervous system that can tolerate.
And I feel like
tools.
That's what, shout out to all my people out there doing the work. That's what we're doing, is we're starting to learn first how to identify with our bodies and our nervous system in a way where we don't start to see it as an enemy, but actually more of an ally that's like, hey, whoa, something's going on here because I'd like support. And so we can see that as something that's not trying to extract from us, or that's not trying to take from us in any way. Like, my anxiety is not here to intentionally ruin my life. My anxiety is here because it's trying to tell me that something doesn't feel right, or that it needs more support. And so a lot of the time I tell my clients, especially the ones that are really strong and really resilient, we tend to think that, at least this was the case in my life, I thought that I had a very big window of tolerance. I thought that my threshold was just like massive. And what I found in that was that actually my window of tolerance is very small, because my ability to be with any form of intensity of situation was actually quite small because of my trauma. So if something started to poke at my childhood trauma or my attachments, I would need to escape. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, any of those would get activated. Whereas when we start to learn to work with our nervous systems, that threshold, that window of tolerance actually gets a bit bigger. So even the challenges, the waves of the challenges can get a little bit bigger or a little deeper, and we're still able to maintain a sense of agency and choice in that.
Someone asked a question. Oh, I don't know what happened.
Let's see if we can find you.
How long have you been? We've been together for 3 years.
Yep.
I don't know how to
Let me
do
see
that
if I
though.
can get it on my phone. I'm going to try to find.
Hi, Damien. Damien Alchemy.
Oh, alchemy. Damien knows. He knows about emotional alchemy.
I think anyone who's been in a relationship has likely been in a relationship that's ended. And there comes a point in any relationship that's ended where someone decides, I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. Where there's a choice, right? It's like, I'm going to continue even though it's challenging, or maybe it's the nervous system that gets too overwhelmed, and they don't have the tools to regulate and navigate, so they decide to step away. And this theory that, relationships end because you reach a moment that you encounter a problem that you can't resolve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's unresolvable. It just means you gave up finding an answer, or you chose not to.
Or like what you said, you just didn't have access to the
The
tools that
tools.
would have supported you. And those tools can be many things. It could be your own personal practice. It could be actually having a therapist or a counselor to support you. Having community, right? I think it's anything that starts to feel, when I start to feel really isolated in our relationship, that's where those thresholds start to get touched upon. And so if you feel like you're going through it on your own and you don't feel seen or supported by your partner, either because they don't see you and don't support you, or they just don't know how, that can cause a massive rift in relationship. We've seen that actually with some of our contact massage clients. They go through something so hard to theoretically and physically manage that it creates a rupture in their relationship, so they separate. And then the journey to come back, like with the clients we had recently, that's part of it. Is like, oh, your relationship kind of suffered a little bit of a trauma. There was a separation there, and now you're on a journey to trying to figure out, how do we rebuild?
Well, that's the challenging part, because a lot of people want to get back to, and this is what I was saying earlier, it's like at the point of trauma or challenge, everything changes. You become a different person.
Yeah.
You can't go back to the people or person that you were before that happened, because that's not who you are anymore. And there can be an expectation of one or both people. It's like, hey, I want to be with the person that I met.
Mm-hmm.
That's unfair.
I feel it's unfair, and it's hard. Like, I think about it on the personal journey, where if we're constantly comparing even ourselves, this is such a great way to look at this actually. If you're constantly comparing yourself to who you were 10 years ago, you're going to suffer, because life is different, you're different. And so if you're like, oh gosh, I just really want to get back to being a marathon runner, right? But I actually have all these physical injuries in my body. Comparing yourself to that is self-inflicted pain. Like, you are self-inflicting pain on yourself, because maybe right now that's not possible. So like, that is so unfair, right? When you kind of think of it that way, it's like, damn, that's really unfair to treat myself that way. Whereas the conversation could be, how can I work with the current limitations that I have and what is available to me, and build off of that? And I feel like that's what people aren't doing.
That's maybe a refusal, but just not accepting what is.
Yes.
It's not being present.
Well, especially if what
true.
felt good, if what in the past felt really, really good in this moment doesn't, of course you're going to want what feels good.
I want to go back to when everything felt great.
Yeah.
And
I want to go back to when we first met and there were so many butterflies, because I had no idea who you were as a person. It's like, you've been together for 10 years. You can't do that. You know too much about each other, right? So it's like, how do you then deepen? This is the deepening the intimacy part. How then can you deepen with what you know and what is available? And are you willing to go on that journey together?
the thing is, what you spoke into last week, that showing up every day with wanting to meet the new person that's woken up that day, and letting go of the narrative, the story, the expectation of everything that happened before.
I think you have to. When I heard that, it just made so much more sense in my body, because if you continued to view me as this woman who got turned inside out during pregnancy and was like low-key losing it, right? If you were, or high-key, I was definitely losing it, y'all. I was really losing it. If you continued to hold that as my identity, it's like, I'm not that person today. I'm not in that state. That doesn't mean I'm not still processing some of that, or that maybe some of that experience is still
That's the
current.
thing, though, isn't it? It's like, you're not that, and you're not who you were before either. And it's like, maybe it's the expectation of, you're different than how you were. Mm-hmm. And I think when couples reach challenge, it's because that's not okay.
Right.
It's like, it's not okay that you're different now than previously.
Right.
It's like, no, but you're always going to be, you're always, just the inevitability of life, change. You're going to evolve to snapshot someone in a particular moment in time and expect them to show up in that way forever, even though I think our parents sometimes do it with...
Well, I mean, that's what we're coming out of, right? We're coming out of that generation that's like, do or die. You know, they didn't have a lot of options in that opportunity, depending on the culture that you grew up in. And so there's something of value, right? It's so easy, y'all. It's so easy to fall in love when chemistry is hot and hormones are pumping and you're in this new love bubble. It's so easy to fall in love there. The challenge is being able to maintain that love throughout the inevitable evolution of each other as individuals and also as a unit.
What is it that's being maintained if everything changes?
Love.
Yeah, what is, like, what does that mean?
That's a great question. What does that mean to you? What would that mean? If we talk about our tether and our ability to stay connected to our love for each other as human beings, love meaning care, concern,
And just connection.
support, connection, right? So then what does that?
Well, I think of all of the relationships that I've had previously where that moment where the relationship ended was where one of us chose to disconnect. It's like, now I'm closing that door.
Mm-hmm.
And I think surviving trauma and surviving challenge is a refusal to close the door. Like, there were multiple moments when I had this desire to step away or to not hold your hand when you asked. But I did it because I didn't want to close the door.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can, like, it's a moment of no return when you choose to close the door.
You definitely can't come back through the same door. It's a different experience. I think once separation has occurred, again, it's a rupture, right? So that tether is now cut and you're left to kind of have your own experiences. And again, when you come back, you are not the same person as when that tether was cut either.
And that's where I feel like, you know, we had a contact massage client recently, two clients, and one of them expressed how they were going through a separation or a reconnection.
A reconnection, yeah.
As they
I was like, I love that
reframed
positive
it.
spin. Yeah, I love that positive spin.
But it wasn't framed by them both that way, and I could feel that. Like, for one, it was a desire to reconnect, and for the other, it was this, no, we've been through a separation and it's different now.
Yeah.
And
What's coming through is this, like, I feel couples in that space, and maybe this is something for us too that we just didn't in some way offer ourselves, was the ability to grieve and mourn that. Because there's so much of just like trying to make it work and trying to do the things, and you invest in this experience and you invest in a therapist and you go to contact massage and all of that. And yet what that says to me, that like that inability to accept the present moment, maybe there's something there that needs to actually be grieved and mourned, individually or collectively as a couple.
like, brought to the table.
Yeah, where you do a grief ritual where you say, hey, wow, we had this really intense experience and I'm missing the version of you that I met before that. And the reason why I'm struggling to accept it is because I honestly haven't given myself the opportunity to grieve that.
I think you're getting
I'm
it
on
there.
something.
Yeah, I think what it is there's a truth that's not being spoken. There is something that's not being said.
or emotions that aren't being fully processed.
Yeah.
Because we talked about like grieving our honeymoon era. Like we talked about it and we talked about how we want to get back to that and everything, but I don't think we actually ever sat there and truly properly grieved that, even for as hard as we would work. And we may still achieve that on some capacity, but will it ever be the same? I don't think so. And so not being with the more intense or harder emotions around that and not giving space for that to be processed could be something that's happening underneath the surface there. Curious to hear your thoughts if y'all want to share in the chat.
Or in the comments if you're watching post live.
Yeah.
What are the skills that determine whether love survives crisis? You know, what we had to create a whole modality.
That's a skill. Your ability to persevere through your own personal practices. And I think the first things that come up for me is your ability to truly actively listen. Because if you really struggle to hear your partner outside of your own perception and outside of your own lens of life experience, it's almost impossible for your partner to feel seen and understood.
That's why communication is so important. I mean, it's why it's one of the pillars.
And also empathy. If you really struggle to empathize, maybe because your values are different or because the conversation that is going on in your mind is just so different, it's almost like I can't believe what you're saying because what's happening inside of me is my subjective truth.
Yeah, it's being filtered through your anthology of scars and having its own spin put on it.
So if you can't separate your own entanglement for the moment of like holding space for your partner in their experience, those are steps towards separation, I feel, because if you can't actively listen to what your partner is saying from this place of like, this is a person who is expressing their vulnerability and their fears to me, and they're doing that because I'm somebody that they can trust and they just really want to be held with reverence and care and love in this moment. Can I do that and separate myself from what it is that they're saying? My ego.
The skill for me in there is the ability to communicate what's alive for you without it being a projection on someone else. And then, you know, the flip of that, being able to receive what someone says, even if it's poorly expressed, so that it doesn't become another.
And not
we struggle with that.
Taking that on as your identity, as this, oh, they're expressing something, this means something about me. It's like they might just need this space to express what their experience is. It's like the second we take that on and make that our identity, we're losing that battle. So on one hand, yeah.
So what's the...
Sorry, y'all, I'm fidgety.
What's the offer to give to someone listening who's either going through or been through something traumatic like an abortion, or is going through maybe an infidelity
or loss of a baby, or anything,
whatever
right?
It is, even like the loss of a parent, even during losing a parent.
Also traumatizing.
Right, whilst in partnership, it impacts how you as an individual show up, not just in your life, but also in the dynamic. And then that can be challenging for the other individual because it's, hey, this person is not the person that I'm used to engaging with, and I have no idea how to deal with this. There's something there for someone going through that right now who is experiencing the challenge in their dynamic and doesn't know how to navigate that.
What was the original question?
It's what do they do? What do you do? What did we do? Like, how did we survive? It took us over a year, and I think we're still coming out of it, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I agree with that. Well, first and foremost, patience. I think patience for yourself and your personal experience. Also patience for the other person. I mean, the nervous system threshold piece is so it's such an important role here, because if a person is at their threshold for an extended period of time, that's when things start to go south very quickly. And everybody has a different threshold. And so I think even conversations like this, you guys, like the scale of receptivity, that saved us. If you want a copy of that, please let us know in the comments or in the chat. If you're here, we will send that to you for free. That tool was something that we developed early in our relationship, and it continues to serve us every single day, because knowing where you're at and how you're feeling in any given moment of the day, you knowing how I'm feeling, it helps. It was a barometer for where we were at. And so we could see improvements through prolonged use of the scale of receptivity. And we also got to understand, like, you have a very different threshold than I do. You have more sensitivity than I do, though I'm also very sensitive, but in a different way. And I feel this journey and this practice helped us understand that about each other better, so that we could also communicate better and be more empathetic.
It would have been really fascinating to keep track of that, like day by day.
Well, I remember thinking,
Good job, buddy.
It's going to be my cue to head out and work out soon.
The difference between trauma that destroys intimacy and
What is this? The difference between trauma that destroys intimacy and trauma that deepens it?
Because, I was going back to this. If you've been in a relationship that has ended, it's because something happened that
Beyond repair.
Beyond the choice of repair.
Yeah, or the desire.
But this is the thing. It's like, if you in the idealized sense of marriage, is whatever happens, we continue to choose each other, even if it's infidelity, even if someone dies, even if it's the loss of a child. The idea of it is, it's this, it's kind of like a pseudo tether, like a mother.
It holds you when you cannot hold each other.
Yeah, a mother-child relationship is something that can never be broken, and I think a marriage is like the artificial expression of that.
Yeah.
It's a vow to never break that bond, that connection, and to continue to show up irrespective of what happens.
Yeah.
And I think a relationship just doesn't reach that point because people choose to separate. They choose to move on to someone else, or to say no, to close the door.
Well, yeah, and especially I think now with modern dating culture, it's
Swipe.
like, hey, if it's not you, like there's 8.6 billion other people that I could go to and try out, and been exhausted in the dating market by. And maybe you do actually find somebody that's better suited for where you're at in that evolution of your life. Like, I do think that for some people, this idea of we outgrew each other is very real. They can no longer hold each other and who they've evolved into, or don't want to hold each other.
I think it's more that. I think it's more of a choice. Because I think it's like we have these circles of who we are, and it's like the Venn diagram of relationship is that you overlap
you, me,
to
we.
some degree.
The you, me, we
Right.
Venn diagram.
And it's inevitable that you will grow as an individual, and so your circle won't just expand, but it'll move. And the relationship is, well, I'm going to commit to make sure that our Venn diagrams overlap at least as much as possible, like as minimal as possible.
You're stuck with me forever.
No, that's the rules,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the idea. It's, I'm going to choose to make sure that our Venn diagrams continue to overlap, and that both of us continue to do that. And
Equal participation. It requires equal participation. So from both parties, right? Both parties have to be willing to meet their partner new every single day, to choose to see them with fresh eyes every day, to understand that humans are meant to evolve, whether that's good or bad, right? Depending on how that evolution happens, regardless of what that journey looks like. And so you have to be willing to choose in that.
Do you believe in soul?
Like my soul or the
Like
Pixar movie? I believe in the Pixar movie.
I believe
Soul.
in the Pixar movie. No, because it speaks into what you were saying earlier with like all of these things that happen to us that create the egoic story of who we are.
Yeah.
But underneath all of it, there's the essence of an individual. Maybe that's soul, if you want to call it that.
Or like our essence nature we were talking before.
Yeah. So
stripped away all the adaptive personalities, the low-key trauma responses we had as a kid.
So classical tantra has this expression, essence nature, and that is how God, how spirit wants to uniquely move through you as a unique individual.
Yeah.
And this one consciousness that expresses itself through multiple pairs of eyes, infinite pairs of eyes. And maybe that's the thing, right? We can go through the trauma that we go through, but there's something that both of us said, no, I'm not going to close the door. And it's not the story of who we are, or it's that thing that's underneath that we can't even point to. But choosing that, it feels like it's a recognition of that, even if it's not able to be put into words, that invites two people to continue to choose one another rather than not. Because it would be so easy to be like, this is really hard. I'm just going to go and start again because I enjoy the fun stuff. And the first 6 months a year is always fun. But then you're chasing that dragon, that high of the new relationship. And you were saying about swipe culture, but we see and speak to so many people who aren't happy because they can't find someone to commit to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We have a 4-minute warning here, and I want to,
Okay.
Damien's comment here, a mother-child relationship is interesting because what if the mother is toxic and limiting? Individuation becomes necessary. I think sometimes people evolve beyond the other person is capable of. And I actually believe that. I think of how many relationships do end up separating because one person is growing and the other person isn't. And so noticing that all of the same hobbies and the same things and ways that they used to relate don't fit the dynamic anymore. And so this is again where I say like it takes two to tango. Like we both have to be complicit in the same journey in order for that relationship to evolve. Because if one person is ascending, I'm using air quotes, if one person is ascending and the other person's just like happy chilling in their level, that is actual separation, energetic, spiritually, and beyond. And so when Damien's talking about individuation, we go through this process naturally as kids regardless, where we were merged. We talked about this in the last episode, like the 3 phases of relationship where we start out merged. You're literally merged in your mother's womb. And then you come out and you start to form your sense of identity, which is individuation. At some point, we then all shift. It doesn't matter whether it's romantic relationship, familial relationship, etc. We start to move into that interdependence. And anything that I feel personally that we were missing as a child, we are constantly looking to correct in our adult relationships. In trauma, we call it correcting the missing experience. So if I had a dad that wasn't present, let's say, which wasn't the case, but if I had a dad that wasn't present, I'm going to be looking for that presence from a male figure probably for the rest of my life until I find that or cultivate that energy for myself. But it's noticing, like, there's just some people it's really hard to have relationships with and continue having relationships with because we're not even speaking the same language anymore. So then what?
It has to be a choice.
It has to be a choice. I agree with that.
Most relationships don't end because love disappears. They end because couples don't know how to navigate trauma together.
Exactly.
And I think that's the choice of...
Around trauma in particular, anyway. When couples go through trauma or a partner of the couple goes through trauma, yes.
It's not knowing how to navigate that.
Yeah, I don't think it's for a lack of love. It's because...
Everything in the way.
Everything that's in the way. And I don't know how to deal with everything that's in the way.
So what would be your... I mean, for me, I think it's the pillars that... And the scale of receptivity as the tool. That if you were going to offer one nugget of wisdom to someone navigating trauma in relationship and not knowing how to do that, what would you say to them?
First, I would say get support anywhere that you can find it.
Somatic therapy.
I mean, that could be us, right? But that could be people in your field.
It was my dad for me.
I love that. It actually brought you closer to your dad.
It did. Both my
Interestingly enough.
parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting support, having a lot of patience for yourself and your own unique processing time. Everybody processes trauma and pain and grief differently and at different rates. And so it's really important that you honor what your natural pace is. If you recognize, like I did, wow, I'm actually getting into some postpartum depression, right? Where now it's not just like that I'm just sad, but I'm starting to be chronically sad or chronically fatigued. Again, use your resources for support in that. We can send you some resources that we have. I honestly, first and foremost, just be like really kind to yourself. Really kind to yourself. That's not the answer I think people typically would have wanted or thought of, but for me, that actually is like a part of the pillar of that experience for me, is I needed to be really kind to myself. That was a cute sound. What would you say? Then we can wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Yeah, kindness is a good one. Support. And that's not people telling you what to do. That's people able to hear what you need to express.
Yeah.
Letting go of expectation and honest communication. Being able to be present with what's there and not suppress it, but find a way to let it out, otherwise it will fester. And to just keep choosing, to keep the door open.
Yeah. Last thing I would say to that is that we don't know what we don't know. And so if you are in a situation where you have the awareness, it's like, I know something's challenging or I know something's blocking this, but I just cannot see what that is, no matter how hard I try. Find people who have been on that journey and go to them, right? Like people who have resources that you don't, or have similar perspectives and have gone through something similar. Because it's one thing to just share your experience with a friend, but if they've never had that experience, like if you're in partnership and your friend's been single their whole life, not the perfect person to go to. They can hold space for you, sure, but if you're actually seeking guidance or mentorship or support, finding somebody
who's walked that path
is clutch, in my opinion.
I don't know what that means.
Clutch. It's necessary. It's necessary.
Necessary.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Great.
It's key.
Clutch.
It's key.
Shift.
Yeah.
Indicator.
Yeah.
Steering wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, thank y'all so much. It's been so nice to be here sharing this with you. Thank you for the comments.
If you are going through challenge in relationship, you're welcome to reach out.
Yeah, of course. Usually in our descriptions, we have a couple links. You could even subscribe to our emails. I'm dropping somatic wisdom and therapy techniques in there. You're talking about Tantra. We also have an upcoming 2-day online tantric intimacy immersive. So if you're curious about these tools around how do I be more present with my partner? How do I hold loving space for myself? How do I change the way that I relate to life, eros?
How do I move through grief whilst not imploding my relationship?
Yeah, why do we separate? We're going to explore why separation occurs. So if you have interest for that also, we can send you information. It'd be beautiful to have you in this space and to continue sharing, gosh, the wealth of knowledge and information that we have professionally as well as from our experience.
Yeah, there'll be a hot seat element to that, so you'll be able to get some live feedback.
Yeah.
Anything else before we say goodbye? 67 minutes.
No, I feel complete.
I feel complete.
That was a great conversation. Yeah. Thank you for the contributions.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for witnessing.
See you next week.
Yeah, if you want to come back, we'll be here at the same time next week, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, Mexico City time.
Mexico City time.
Maybe you can set up an alert on YouTube or something, and it'll ding you and remind you.
Maybe we can do that.
Maybe we can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Have a beautiful weekend.
Bye.